Sheffield City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
Warm PCEC welcome to Stuart Prentice about food security. Come up, come on!
Thank you for the warm welcome, very kind. As mentioned, my name is Stuart Prentice. I'm going to give a talk today on some issues that we have around food security globally, locally, and what I believe can be some solutions that can go towards making a positive impact around that. Now, I've been given this little bit of technology to move the slides on, and I'm hoping it's going to work, but it doesn't appear, so maybe you can move the slide on for me, Mr. Technology. This is just a little video as an introduction to some of these real-life problems. So, there's lots of these issues globally. It's a problem. You see news articles, news items every day about this kind of thing, and I think some of the stats are quite alarming on it. You've probably all got your own experiences as well of things that you've read or maybe things that you've seen where these issues are a problem. I know personally for the last 5 years I've been living in various places, 3 of those places, Hong Kong, Singapore and Dubai. And my personal experiences of being in those places were that maybe from the outside you would think, well, they're very wealthy, these places wouldn't have food security issues, but the one thing that each of those locations has in common is that they import 90% or just over of their fresh produce. Hong Kong and Singapore, you can imagine why they haven't got so much land there. In Dubai, you're out in the desert, they can't rely on traditional agriculture, so that's a huge amount of imports, and they're actually all quite active in looking for technological solutions so they can gain more of their own food security. But you can look at different places and see different kinds of issues. It's my view that no country has food security. I was reading a report about 18 months ago that came from the Minister of Agriculture in China, and that report was stating that around 20% of all their arable land was now contaminated. It was effectively poisoned because of overuse of pesticides. That's incredible, and I would imagine if 20% is the official line coming out of China, it could be a little bit different officially. Even something that happened relatively recently, in the last couple of years, in the UK, where I'm from, there was very unseasonal flooding in southern Spain, and southern Spain sometimes gets referred to as the green grocer of Europe, and it wiped out a huge amount of crops of lettuce, to the point where the impact of that was a couple of months later, there were rations in the major supermarkets for lettuce. Iceberg lettuce, one per customer, for about £4. So it was really incredible. You know, nothing like that has happened with regards rationing since after the Second World War. Really crazy. But what that does, it highlights to you that there are issues with food distribution, and there are issues, as you can see, with the environment, and natural harvest cycles can't be relied upon to generate the level of food for people that's needed. You saw on the video, we're expecting there to be an extra 2 billion people on the planet by 2050. So solutions need to be found away from traditional agriculture, because there are many, many problems with that. There's also many problems with things going on in the oceans as well. I saw some interesting news that came from a UN study just over the last week that said things are a lot more alarming than they actually anticipated initially. But you see a lot in the news about things going on in the oceans, all the plastic and the waste that ends up in there, the fact that it's affected marine life to such a degree. And the stat around that really is that 230 million tonnes are going to be needed of fish by 2050. It's already 3 billion people's main source of protein. And if you can just move on to the next slide. The World Resources Institute have estimated that by 2050, traditional fishing has to be overtaken by aquaculture, fish farming, or there could just be devastation beyond what any of us could believe in the oceans. So again, you know, quite alarming. You can move the slide, please. So, like everywhere, Thailand has its own problems, okay, regarding food safety and food security. One of the problems that we have here in Thailand is that lots of the good quality produce that is grown here actually gets sold for export for better prices. And that means that a lot of unregulated, untested produce can end up into the marketplace. It's untested, it could be high in pesticide content. And it certainly is an issue. And there was an article in the Bangkok Post just a couple of months ago that went into some detail around this, and the authorities had actually just released a report saying that 3 potentially harmful pesticides could continue to be used for the next 2 years, despite what they were being given advice on. Which, again, was quite alarming, and lots of consumer rights bodies were kicking up a fuss about this and just saying it's not fair, you know, this food that is potentially harmful is making it onto plates. So that's a couple of the problems that you've got here, probably perhaps over-exporting and untested cheaper produce making it into the market. So what that's really done is it's left local market shortfalls. And that's one of the reasons that my company exists, Midas Aquaponics. If you could move us on, please. Now, yeah, I work for a company called Midas, and we started our project back in 2015 in October. And our company vision really was to as well as be profitable, grow food locally and sell it locally. Clean food that's chemical free, supplied into the market at a competitive price. That's what we were looking to do. Now, when we started this project, we had to plough millions and millions of our own parts into developing the first greenhouses and the technology needed to be able to grow the produce effectively. But we knew we would make more of an impact if we could grow at a more rapid rate. But how much capital do you keep putting into these things before seeing money back? It was a tough time right at the beginning. And when we spoke to banks about this, I can assure you they had zero interest in lending money for an aquaponics project. And don't worry, I'm going to explain what aquaponics is in more detail for those that don't know in a moment. It was basically high-tech farming. The banks didn't want to know. And also, when we spoke to other people, perhaps venture capitalists, they generally just want too much of your business. So we came up with an idea. Now, this idea has just helped us grow. The idea was that we would grow through individual investment. We'd make it commercially viable for an individual to get involved in aquaponics, and we would grow the business through investment revenue, which is what we've been doing, and it's how we've been able to grow from one small greenhouse in Chiang Mai to the 32 right site that we see today. So, if you want to move the slide on, please. So, what is aquaponics? Some of you may know, some of you may not know. It quite often gets thought about for people that do know what this is as the type of thing someone with a hobby might do in the back garden, or you may have heard about hydroponics. But to give you the best explanation I can, it's a marriage of two different cultures. So, hydroponics is growing without the need for soil. You use water, nutrients, light, and you're able to grow. No soil is involved. And aquaculture, which is fish farming. And aquaponics is the marriage of these two cultures. What we're really doing is using nutrient-rich fish water to pump into our growing tables to enable the growth of things like lettuce and herbs. So that's a little bit about what aquaponics is. This is just a very short video of our farm in Chiang Mai. So for those of you that have not seen anything about this kind of operation before, well, this is what we do. So yeah, that's from about 18 months ago actually, the farm's developed a little bit more, and I'll be showing you some images of that shortly. But because I'm talking about issues relating to food security and why I believe aquaponics and hydroponics and high-tech farming can be part of the solution moving forward, I think we just need to break it down and compare, you know, what we do with traditional agriculture. I mean, first of all, I think everyone would understand in traditional agriculture what you have to do if you're planting something like a lettuce seed. You would plant that in soil, and it is then the seed's job. It will expel its energy through its roots to find water and nutrients. It expels energy doing that, so it takes some time to grow. And what we get with aquaponics is a much increased harvest cycle. It's much more rapid. We're also growing in a controlled environment, so we're not subject to the risks that you may associate with traditional agricultural practices. You can get things like pest, infection, and the big one, if you take any notice of what's going on with weather patterns and global warming, there are some very erratic and random conditions that are affecting harvest cycles right throughout the world. And we're not subject to that because we're growing indoors, so we control what we can. The produce is also cleaner and it's safer when we're not taking the chance of growing in potentially polluted soils. We control everything that goes into the process there, which is another benefit. And as well as being able to grow in volume, our processes are much more efficient as well. We get much less waste than you would in traditional agriculture. We actually average on each harvest just below 10%, which is pretty good if you consider we grow a lot of lettuce and nobody buys a lettuce that doesn't look right. It's got to be aesthetically pleasing. We also grow a mixture of herbs as well, and it's not so much an issue with herbs because when they're chopped from our growing tables, you chop them up again. So with herbs, we get next to zero waste. So it is very efficient as well. So it is a green, ethical, sustainable way of growing produce. We've got many certifications to support this as well. One of them being from Majo University, which is the largest agricultural university here in Thailand. Well, to ensure that our clients on the investment side are getting the best possible service, we not only take interns from there, but most of our staff are degree educated and come from Majo University. Because of this relationship we've got with them, we had them come to our farm last October, and they actually tested our range of produce and were able to certify it 100% pesticide free, which we were very proud of. And also something that relates to the efficiency I'm talking about, we use 90% less water than traditional agriculture. It's quite a staggering amount really, 90% less. And that's because anything that's not absorbed by the seed, we can ultimately recycle. So I'm just talking about some of the accreditations. Majo University I mentioned, these are important in terms of assessing food safety and standards. I know when I go to Tesco, for example, I notice in their aisle they will have the GAP certified produce. I don't know if any of you have ever noticed that, but perhaps the next time you go into the supermarket you will. Now GAP, GAP, is a globally recognised certification. What this does is it shows our buyers of produce that it is of a certain standard, because they have to come to our farm every single year and assess our build, all our processes, everything from the construction to the nutrition tanks and how we pump and filter the water to achieve that. And it also, when we've got GAP certification, we sell to a range of wholesalers, restaurants and hotels. They know that they're buying certified produce, so it enables us to keep the price at a more reasonable level as well. The wholesalers that we sell to ultimately sell on to supermarkets, and that's what they look for, the GAP certification. And also, we're very proud to be part of the United Nations Global Compact. It's one of the first accreditations we achieved, and we are one of only 8,000 businesses to have this. And the reason being is because we have this close link in terms of providing a realistic, high-tech solution to food security and safety with what we're growing. So, the key to the solution with this, it's not only based on quality of produce, but also on the volume. I mentioned before that we get a much more rapid harvest cycle than you would with traditional agriculture. And it's quite simply because the produce that we're growing, it's been given the perfect environment within which to flourish. And that means we can get 14 crops of lettuce in a year. 8 crops of the herbs, 2 of the fish, which is currently crayfish. And I mentioned to you before as well about the efficiency of the water processes. So this is really vital in terms of why I view that this type of high-tech farming can be linked to creating a realistic solution for the food issue and food security and safety issues that we see at the moment. We grow in great volume. So what we do is we use a system called a MAS, an MAS. It's quite simply an abbreviation of Midas Aquaponics System. But what happens in our farms is we have these individual systems, and they're all owned actually by different investors. Some own 1, some own 10, some own 20. Every single one has its own serial number, and each system is able to generate quite a lot of food. So on average, 116 kgs of crayfish, 530 kg of lettuce, around 2,000 kg of herbs in a year. So it's substantial. You cannot compare the output that you would get if you were using traditional methods with what we're able to generate aquaponically because of the perfect conditions that we are able to create. So that's why I can make this link. So why Thailand? Why do we operate here? Well, you will find aquaponics and hydroponics and these kind of high-tech farms dotted around the world. There are many of them, but most of them just operate on a very small scale. And as I said, the perception tends to be that this is the kind of hobby that someone would have in their shed or something, which you can. But we've been able to scale this up and grow industrially and make it into a very profitable business that's making a positive impact as well. But Thailand is good for aquaponics. We've got good conditions here, mainly because we don't have to use an unofficial lighting like LEDs. We're able to use the natural light. And we're great believers in replicating nature as much as we possibly can. By using natural light, we know we can get the right colour, the right taste, the right look of the produce as well. So that's important for us. And also we've got a relatively low cost of goods compared to the sale price. I mentioned we continue to get certifications and accreditations of what we do because it helps us keep a higher price in the market. We are actually growing in a premium quality produce. Also, because of our track record, we've got a great reputation since we started, and we're selling to all kinds of organisations, but mainly into the wholesale market. We then sell to supermarkets, we sell to restaurants, and we also sell to hotels as well. 2 of the most well-known, actually, Holiday Inn up in Chiang Mai and the Meridian. And we've developed a relationship, especially with the Meridian, over the last couple of years, and they have really helped us in terms of supplying produce into the market that is in high demand. One of those stories around our relationship with Meridian was our migration from one type of fish to another, for example. when we started our project, we were harvesting fish tilapia, but it was through conversations with the head chef at the Meridian that we have since migrated onto Australian crayfish. That's better on a number of fronts, one of them being that we achieve 4 times the price for the produce. And also, I'm led to believe they're easier to look after as well, so that's good news. But that's just an example of us being able to respond to demands from the market. One of the beauties with what we do as an agricultural organisation is that we're not stuck with a monocrop that can only be grown outside. We can adapt to market needs and conditions, whether it be they require different types of herbs at different times in the year, or different types of lettuce. We're very flexible in how we can make that approach. So you saw a little video earlier of the farm in Chiang Mai, but I just wanted to show you what was there before, and pretty much nothing. So you can just click through a couple of these photographs. Yeah, and to the next one. Yeah, and this is essentially where the vision was born. We looked at this piece of land and thought, yes, that's perfect for an aquaponics farm. Now we did all kinds of research, and that piece of land we looked at and assessed and ultimately graded and developed, and also we're sharing our dream of what we were going to build with our early stage investors as well. And we told them we were going to build that, and we did, and that's the site as it is today. A full 32 rides. If you go on to the next picture as well, you can see almost a natural border to the land. 32 ride parcel of land with those greenhouses. We literally just started with the one right at the back and have since been developing to what you see today. Now there's a lot of technology that goes into this. I know from just the outset there they just look like greenhouses, but even from the construction, we use one of the most well-known greenhouse experts in the world to help with our construction of these. And even the raised gable you see on top of the greenhouses, that's been put strategically there and built into the construction to maximise airflow into the greenhouses, because it's really important for us that we're keeping the temperature at a certain level to optimise production. And we also have cooling pads as well that are dotted around the inside of the farm. But yeah, we went from nothing and we ended up with a farm like this, which I think is quite impressive. So this is just a few images from inside the farm. You can see there a couple of different types of lettuce being grown. It shows you how vast the greenhouses are. That's oak leaf red. We can move on again. I think one thing you notice when you look at the images is how uniform the produce is. Very consistent, very flush looking lettuce. This is the Australian crayfish. So I mentioned before that we just migrated over onto the crayfish. One of the interesting things about this is actually why. So it came from discussions from the head chef at the Meridian Hotel, but the reason being is that in Chiang Mai and also in Bangkok, the occupancy rate of the hotels is very, very high with Chinese tourists. And I also think it's an interesting stat to know that the Chinese eat 90% of the world's crayfish, which is quite incredible. I was speaking to one of my clients from Louisiana in the US who told me they like crayfish there as well, and he was quite staggered by that. But yeah, they eat a lot of crayfish. You can move on. And yeah, there's some pictures of it on the plate as well, looking very tasty indeed from the Meridian menu. So, what we've done in Chiang Mai is basically build that farm and done lots of research and development into various products, worked out what would sell the best by doing lots of research up front. And we've also got contacts and connections into all the different farms around Thailand and all the different wholesalers as well. So we know what there's demand for at any particular time. We know what the daily fluctuation is of prices, so we can always sell goods at the right premium prices as well. Also in our farm, we're constantly doing research and development in terms of what we can do differently. A project we were concentrating on just a couple of months ago has been the growth and production of kale. Kale is considered a superfood. It's massively in vogue in Europe now and has been for a couple of years, and we're starting to see similar trends in terms of demand for that here in Southeast Asia. So we're looking at the moment just developing some systems specifically for kale. When I was up there just a couple of weeks ago, one of the agronomists was actually experimenting with the growth of Japanese watermelons as well, which was quite interesting. And they don't grow on our traditional systems. It was something completely different, but it was very interesting that they could do it. You know, I don't know if you've ever had one. I didn't even know what they were until about 3 or 4 months ago. But they're heavy. They've almost got hard as shell on them. And the reason we're looking into that at the moment is there's a very high concentration of expats, Japanese expats in Bangkok, and we know from discussions with the wholesalers that we can get very good prices for those. So what we've been doing is we've been growing and developing in quite small steps in Chiang Mai. We've been working and selling this as an investment to individual investors, but we reached a point where demand outstripped supply. Because what we're growing is just not widely available. You can't grow the type of lettuce that we're growing, for example, all year round anywhere in Thailand. We're able to give the buyers of our produce access to the type of things we are growing right throughout the year. So that's that's an important aspect for anyone who buys the produce. So what we had to do then, excuse me, is think about building a new farm, and that's what we've been doing over the last few months. Again, a picture of not a great deal here, but it's our site in Pak Chong. And these first pictures just show you the land that we were looking at before we did anything on that. And we've now taken that land on and started construction. So the next few pictures actually show the steelwork going up there, and also some images from above that show you the site. We're actually going to be developing an initial 42 rise there. That's the first project, but we actually have access to around 300 rai of land. For those that don't know, Pak Chong is about 2 hours northeast of Bangkok, so it's strategically located from our perspective to be able to give us great access to the markets in Bangkok. This farm actually now, those pictures were from a couple of weeks ago, and we expect production to start there after some initial testing in June this year. So we're getting on with it. We've been very successful so far in terms of the development. And what we've been doing, I'll just point out here, I mentioned to you just a couple of times throughout the presentation that we've grown our company through investment capital. And I'm not here to particularly pitch you about an investment right now, but the story is interlinked. It's how we've grown the business. I would say that anybody who wants more information from me about the investment, well, you can speak to myself. I'll be hanging around afterwards. There's also my colleagues Nick and Dewey. We've got some forms here if you want to leave your name and number and email address, and I can speak to you separately in more detail about how the investment works for individuals. But ultimately what our clients have been doing is buying these individual systems. These individual systems retail at 35k and pay a return of on average 16%. And it works because of all the things that I've been talking to you about, the link with food security, the high-tech strategies that we have been able to employ, and the huge volume of food that we're able to produce and sell into the market. So I would say at this stage that pretty much covers probably most of what I would tell you about, and I'll hand over for questions in just a few moments. What I will say first of all is hopefully just as a summary, some of you may know about aquaponics and hydroponics already, some of you may not. I just really wanted to explain what this was on a very basic level. so you understood what we were doing as a business and how, in a very small way, we're trying to make a positive impact on some of these food security and safety solutions that were highlighted in the beginning. Also, I'm not trying to say my company is the solution, far from it, we're way too small. But it is my view that over the coming years, as the landscape of traditional agriculture continues to change and be affected by things like global warming and freak weather patterns, that high-tech farming has to be looked at as a viable solution to be able to feed the 2 billion extra mouths that we're going to have to feed by 2050. These are real issues. So we do things on a very small, localized scale, but I honestly believe that this type of farming can be a genuine solution. I hope that you see the link there as well. And just before I finally hand over to the floor for some questions, I will just add a little disclaimer. I'm not an aquaponic farmer. So some of you may have done it on a small scale, a big scale, I don't know. But it wasn't really going into the science too much behind this. I'm not going to be able to talk to you about percentages of nutrient content that gets filtered into the system and things like that. I'm not the guy that goes and gets his hands dirty. I just run an office in Bangkok, so I just wanted to make you aware that I'm not the scientist, but hopefully the information has been useful for you today, and thank you all very much for listening. Thank you.
Yes, I noticed your very large greenhouses. I presume they're covered with plastic. How do they hold up under certain wind conditions we get here?
Well, I know they've had some conditions up in Chiang Mai recently that they have had to adapt to. Not so much wind, but more on the pollution. They're very adaptable. The things are, they're not made out of bricks and mortar. I don't know technically 100% how they would do that, but I know the structures are adaptable, so they can respond to whatever weather conditions there would be, for example. I don't know if high winds would result in them having to maybe put something extra on there and nail in. I'm not 100% sure how they'd react to that. What I do know is when they had the pollution that was really bad a couple of months ago, they had to close all the vents. So there was no natural airflow coming through, and we had to rely solely on the cooling vats.
Just a second little question.
Sure.
If the imported Australian crayfish, if they get out in the wild here, is that going to have an adverse effect on the local animals in the rivers?
I wouldn't imagine so, as we wouldn't allow them anywhere near the wild. We actually have a breeding program on the farm in Chiang Mai where they go from egg to harvest. So yeah, it would be extremely unlikely, I would imagine.
Okay, over here. Thanks very much for that presentation. One thing I would like to know, you talked about starting small and then growing to your current sort of size and then expanding even further. I'm wondering, and I know it's probably not your business model to do this, but I'm wondering about the reverse. If you are developing this technology, could it be made available by some sort of investment vehicle to some of the small farms, the small village co-ops that cover a lot of Thailand? Do you understand what
I think so, yes. So, I mean, what we are doing, and I was quite honest about this, we're growing premium quality produce, yeah? So for it to make a real positive impact on, say, local lives of perhaps poorer people here, could these methods be applied, to smaller villages? Is that the type of thing?
Yeah. You've got village co-ops and farmer co-ops in villages, or even individual small farmers who've got land. Could this technology be made available in a sort of reverse direction to the one you just described?
Well, we'd like to think so, and that probably will be how, if we're going to utilise and harness this technology to solve these solutions, that's how it would have to be done on a grand scale. But you've got two main barriers to entry with aquaponics. That is cost. Costs a lot of money to set up, to get the greenhouses built, constructed, and then put in place the nutrient tanks, the pumping systems. It's a lot of money. So first of all, who's going to pay for it? And then the second issue is lack of knowledge around this. There are so many, it's so difficult to find people that are actually educated and who can run and manage these farms. For example, we get offers. Honestly, every day my phone rings with people who own land here in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, all these landowners. And they're asking us, can we build a farm? Sure, okay, well we can come and take your money and build a farm for you, but then what are they going to do with it? They can't manage it themselves, they don't know how to do it. And we quite simply don't have the manpower. There aren't enough people out there who know how to run these farms. So sadly, it's going to take longer than it perhaps should. It's my view that hydroponics and aquaponics would have already overtaken perhaps traditional agricultural farming methods if the skill set was there, but quite simply isn't. So I think it needs to really go to a starting point as an educational thing and people learn about it. One of the things we do, sorry it's a long answer around your question, but one of the things we do in Chiang Mai, we're very keen on this, is that we invite local schools into our farms and we show the next generation of children how these things operate and try and give them a different perception on what farming is to people here. Because the perception of farming is very different in Thailand to the type of farming that we're doing. We're trying to get the next generation interested in this and showing them that it's not just simply planting, a seed in soil. It's a scientific process. So we're trying to do what we can on a very small scale, but to solve the problems, it's education and money.
Thanks. I notice your, aquaponics and hydroponics, they're very plastic intensive. Can you use recycled plastics in all the construction?
Well, we use the best materials we possibly can. I mean, it's got to be very, very high grade because we're growing food on it. So we maintain these systems to the best of our ability so that we're minimising the waste, if you like. So the gullies that we use, the panels where the water runs through, they're in constant use. So rather than just replace them all the time, we will patch them up and maximise the performance on them and keep the maintenance on them going for as long as they possibly can while they are effective. Can we look at more different, solutions in terms of how these farms are built with better materials in the future? I'm sure the technologies have been advancing all the time, but at the minute we work with the best materials that we can.
Over here, young man. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, anyway.
Have you had any association with the Child Protection and Development Centre at all?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, because the children are actually indulging in hydroponics, and from what I gather they've just started onto aquaponics as well, and these children are producing enough produce that they become self-sustaining, and they're almost at the point of being able to sell on the open market as well.
Wow, excellent. Where is that?
It's down here in Pattaya, on the outskirts.
Brilliant. I mean, that's an unbelievable story. I mean, that deserves more coverage than it will probably get.
I'll have your business card afterwards because I shall be seeing Kun Toi tonight, and I'll tell her about you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
On your left side.
Thank you for an interesting talk. I had a very similar setup in Ireland for many years. We were using flood and drain system rather than a trickle system to water the plants. It was mainly shrubs and bedding plants and that sort of thing, but we did a certain amount of vegetables. I see that you've got a lot of open ground around the glass houses. What are you growing? I see in rows and rows of things. Are they herbs? And what are the herbs?
Sure. So, what you predominantly saw in the pictures and images that we had there in Chiang Mai is a mixture of lettuce, frise, oak leaf red, butterhead, more types of lettuce than you probably care to remember. And we also grow a mixture of herbs as well. What we're actually doing, the farm in Pak Chong, is going to be our latest generation of systems. So on the one system, we'll be growing a mixture of those lettuce. We'll also be growing a mixture of herbs, anything from basil, oregano, mint. And it literally is whatever is in demand. So there are certain times of the year, for example, where we know the wholesalers, the restaurants want oak leaf instead of butterhead, for argument's sake. We are in touch with the markets on a daily basis, so we know what we're able to adapt our produce to. But it is predominantly mixed lettuce, mixed herbs, and crayfish.
Okay. One here.
What's his name?
Yeah, thanks for the very informative talk. I noticed that most of the stuff you grow is leaf. How would you envisage growing such things as, I mean, there's a lot of different types of food, potatoes, beetroot, celery, and the list goes on and on. It's not just leaf products that feed the world, it's a whole series of, and I'm well informed about the Australian crayfish actually.
Yeah, sure. And there are, there's many different food types, some of which you can grow more effectively than others using these types of systems. And for example, I know, say, tomatoes using a hydroponic systems, you can do it effectively, but you won't get the same type of yield as you will with, say, lettuce or the leafy greens that we've got. So that's just what we do. We've adapted and developed our systems to be the best that they possibly can, growing lettuce, herbs, and the fish. But there are ways and systems where you can grow other things. Whether we'll diversify into them at some point, I don't know. But I did mention in the presentation we're currently in our research and development facilities in Chiang Mai. We've been trialling the growth of kale, and that is on a slightly different system. From the top it looks similar, but it is slightly different. And the ones for the Japanese watermelons, well, they're absolutely nothing like the systems that you've seen there. I mean, it's more of a vertical type arrangement. So we are looking at other things all the time. And as I mentioned, my company's never going to solve the world's food security problems. We're just trying to do what we can on a more localized scale, and we're doing what we're good at the moment. But of course, diversification is key. And the beauty of what we're doing is if certain things go out of vogue in the market, so for example, if, in terms of the herbs, if nobody wants mint anymore, well, we can grow different herbs. If nobody ever wants to eat butterhead lettuce again, hey, no problem, we just grow fruit, say, oak leaf, whatever it is. So we can diversify it already across the greens, and then in terms of other food, yeah, we'll just keep looking and testing and seeing what the market wants.
Thank you.
Another one here.
Yeah, it's me again. Just a little comeback. You've described a system which is very efficient as far as water use is concerned. I'm wondering if you already have, or maybe you plan in the future to look at the energy side of things. I mean, for instance, the energy that is required. Would you be looking at solar panels, wind generated energy, or maybe even biodigesters for the waste product?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, we're using traditional power methods, but we've already looked and spoke to some solar panel providers about the possibility of running the farm on solar. I know we've had discussions about that. It's finding the necessary space for the panels to be able to, generate the necessary power you need for the farm. But I've been led to believe there are other developers around the world that have been able to harness that very effectively. We've not yet. We just didn't have the land in Chiang Mai or the money, to be quite frank, to be able to look at that. But in our second development in Pak Chong, we have much more access to there's much more room there to be able to start looking at that as something more viable. But yeah, it's a good point, because that would be your ideal scenario, to have something that's 100% green, ethical, zero waste, and being able to have clean power like that would be great.
On your left. Oh, I'd just like to compliment you on your presentation.
Thank you very
It's so refreshing to hear somebody give a long presentation without reading from a script. And congratulations, you really done well.
All right, I appreciate that, thank you.
You mentioned cooling beds. You need to keep the water at lower temperatures to keep the plants happy. Can you tell us anything at all about how you cool the water?
Sure, so everything's connected to an electronic system and computer-based system that effectively keeps the water at the optimum temperature and also the temperature right around the greenhouse. It is one of the biggest challenges that I know the farmers face here, it's not an easy thing to do, but they manage to do it whereby the fish can flourish. And in the actual greenhouse themselves, just aside from the water, when conditions are good and they're not having so many problems with, say, pollution in Chiang Mai, they have air vents on the side of the greenhouses, we have the cooling pads around there. That helps contribute to the temperature of the water and, as I say, also the systems that are plugged into the electronic, cooling pads. It's my accent, sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So you have ponds that...
Pads, yeah, cooling pads we call them. They kind of go around the perimeter of the...
Okay, that provides you the cool...
Yeah. That's how we control the temperature. Ideally, you do it with a natural mixture of airflow, but we didn't have that option a few weeks ago when it was really bad. It was installing the cooling pads. But it didn't, we adapted, it did not affect production. That's one of the beauties of growing indoors, you know. And things can go wrong outside and it will wipe out crops, be it unseasonal flooding or pollution, whatever it may be. We don't get that. We don't get that. And even if we do lose one crop of any item, you know, again, it's not a disaster because we're able to yield 14 crops of lettuce, 8 of herbs, 2 of the fish. Even if we did lose something due to contamination or whatever it may be, it's not an absolute disaster as it is in traditional agriculture.
You mentioned selling to Meridians and Holiday Inn hotels in Chiang Mai. Do you do any retail business? And if you do, how do your products compare in price with those regularly available in the local markets?
Not yet, we don't, but it's something we've been looking at now for over 6 months. A couple of the supermarkets here in Thailand have been to our farm and compiled various stages of due diligence on us and our processes. To be quite frank, we're not really big enough to say just to be able to supply to all the Tesco Lotuses in Thailand, you know. We would have to have a completely separate project where they're essentially getting their own farm, but they have been doing due diligence on us for a number of months. But my view is, although we have the brand ready and certain things ready to go direct to retail, I think we're looking at another 12 to 18 months because these things don't happen very quickly, especially as far as the supermarkets are concerned.
But you feel you can compete with the local markets?
Yeah, I mean, the problem of dealing with supermarkets is more of a headache, and your systems have got to be so on point to meet their demand. It is definitely a bigger headache, but there's more money in it for sure. So yeah, we can be very competitive and supply to those directly. We're not an old business. We only set up the project in 2015, so you know, even if we were to start supplying to one of the supermarkets tomorrow, I would consider that incredible speed, given how quickly they move. But yeah, it's on the radar. One day, I think we will have our own branded produce going direct to retail.
You've told us about the advantages of natural light and being in Thailand and so on. Does it have to be tropical areas of the world?
Well, no, I mean, you can take this technology anywhere, but you're still going to have to adapt to the environment that you are in. You know, if you did a setup like this in Northern Europe, your challenge is going to be when it gets really cold in the winter, and you've got to have your greenhouse have the ability to be able to adapt to those conditions. But it's much easier than adapting to the conditions outside, that is for sure. But yeah, you can take and harness this technology and adapt to the environment that you're in anywhere. I know, for example, that the largest hydroponic tomato farm anywhere in the world is in Kent in England. So, you know, that's what they're doing there. But these setups are all around the world. I've been to many agricultural exhibitions over the last few years, and I met some. One of them was in Vegas about 18 months ago, and I met a lot of growers there. And a lot of them were from California, but they were all using hydroponic technology, but they were growing in shipping containers, using LED lighting. And it wasn't just marijuana either, it was food. So, and that was incredible to me, because most of the setups I see have been able to use natural light. You can use LED lighting, but again, you have to adapt to your environment. We're lucky here we can use the natural light, that works for us, and keeps costs down.
We appear to have come to the end of the questions.
Thank you very much.
So I would really like to thank you. I personally found that tremendously interesting and optimistic, and get that sign. So anyway, as a small token of our great appreciation for your excellent talk, we get your book.